The NFL has approved 2 big rule changes that are going to change the way the game is played and how it looks. One is a promising rule modification that I think we'll eventually accept, and the other one, while well-intentioned, is going to make it harder for defenses to, do their job and tackle.
The Chiefs won. I couldn't tell if it was a hip drop or not.
Today, I'll reveal what the new kickoff will look like and how it will affect the game. I can show you great visual evidence because, we had these kickoff rules in the XFL and USFL. I will also discuss the problem with the hip drop tackling ban. And finally, I have a new nugget in the Sean Payton must have really despised Russell Wilson relationship drama. Ooh, that is good sports. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you don't, the next NFL rule change will be having me killed. Now, this last week, the NFL owners and coaches all got together for the annual owners meetings. It's where they meet to discuss proposed rule changes, compare net worths, and make fun of Mark Davis. At the annual owners meetings, media is granted access to talk to all of the head coaches and owners and presidents, general managers, whoever. Now, you may have heard about 85 million times that the Broncos cut Russell Wilson despite taking on an $85 million dead cap hit. Here was Sean Payton being asked about if that was a tough decision to make.
Was it difficult for us knowing that the dead cap consequences were so severe to make that decision to let him go?
No.
He really hates Russell Wilson. That's one of the coldest things I've ever heard a coach say. Look, I've done my best to be fair to Russ, but I sort of love Sean Payton being like, I would have paid that mother licker $1 billion to not play for my fucking offense. 99 other coaches would have just said this. We take a lot of time and put a lot of thought into every decision we make for this team. No decision is made lightly, and while we're grateful for everything Russ gave to the organization, ultimately we believe this was the best decision for the team moving forward. That's what everyone but Sean Payton would have said.
This idea that he and I, or we don't have a good relationship, or he's not the fit, all of that stuff I think comes from people further away from our program.
Was it difficult for us knowing that the dead cap consequences were so severe to make that decision to let him go?
No.
Sean never liked Russ. We all got that impression, but Sean would have put up with Russell Wilson if Russ were able to run his offense. It would have been like a bad relationship, but the sex was so good that they just couldn't break up. Sean's disdain for quarterbacks who can't process the field is how we as fans feel every time the NFL makes rule changes we hate. One I don't necessarily hate is the NFL moved the trade deadline back 1 week. This makes sense as the season is now 1 week longer and it gives many players one extra game, all the way until November 5th, to suck so bad their team has no choice but to trade them, Chase Claypool. Now, the NFL has also made hip drop tackles illegal, meaning they can now be flagged for 15 yards, which just made NFL officials' jobs harder, which is cool because now even the NFL is saying, fuck the refs. Oh, this is great branding for me. Over at benchwarmerbrew.com, we do have this coffee still available. And coming tomorrow, we're gonna be launching my wife Jess's tea, Creativity. It's a strawberry lemon tea, and if you don't buy it, she's gonna fucking leave me. So go do it, please. Tomorrow, benchwarmerbrew.com. She said if we don't sell out in 24 hours, I'm gonna wake up without a penis. Now, I made a short about this hip drop rule, and I'm going to play it again here because it's concise about what the rule change is. Now, you might be asking yourself, what's a hip drop tackle? Isn't that just a regular tackle? Well, here's how the league defines it. It's essentially a tackle where the defender wraps the runner with both arms and unweights himself by dropping his hips and or lower body and landing on and or trapping the runner's legs at or below the knees. Sounds like tackling? Now, the NFLPA NFLPA has been firmly against this proposal, claiming it'll cause even more player, coach, official, and fan confusion. And it's pretty hard to disagree with that because I'm sure most of you watching are already confused as to what the hell just got banned. When pretty much every player seems to be against a rule change, I don't like it, since, they're the ones playing the game. Either way, hip drop tackles were reportedly more dangerous than a regular tackle, whatever that is, and resulted in 20 to 25 times more injuries than your garden variety takedown. Hip drop tackles will now be greeted with a 15-yard penalty, and I'm sure this has nothing to do with the 5.5-point dip in scoring over the last 4 years. Flag football won't just be for the Olympics soon enough. And I stand by the fact that players aren't asking for this change. J.J. Watt, Justin Simmons, those are stand-up players. That's not Vontaze Burfict or Bill Romanowski bitching about the change. Those are not and never have been dirty players, and they're voicing their disgust with this rule change. The NFLPA, aka the Players Union, was outwardly very against it, and the owners still didn't consider that at all. Surprise, surprise.
I think it's going to be very, very hard to truly call that live in game.
If you're a defensive player trying to understand what you can and can't do, they are making it almost impossible.
Bills GM Brandon Beane on Pat McAfee's show did give me a little bit of hope when he said this.
I don't think it's going to be really called at this point. I think it's going to be more so on Monday or Tuesday. Okay. Player X gets this fine.
Now, the real problem is counting on an NFL official to identify at full speed a defender intentionally swiveling to a runner's backside and unweighting himself onto the lower body versus a defender just trying to fucking tackle a big fast dude where momentum carries his body onto the lower half. Now, hip drop tackles can injure the lower leg. Okay, that's a fact. Ankle, knee, leg bones, whatever. So yes, they're dangerous, but they're not that common in the league. What players have asked for is grass fields because we know unequivocally that turf leads to more lower body injuries. We know playing one more game every season for every team leads to more injuries. Banning hip drops doesn't cost money. Grass fields do. An extra game makes more money. When you hear the league say safety, just replace it with the words more money and you will understand exactly what they are saying. Now, I think this rule change is going to result in more unnecessary penalties, something we've all wanted.
No.
I think we are going to see defenders unfairly penalized for making tackles that aren't dirty, but might appear dirty to an official. One example they cited is Logan Wilson's tackle on Mark Andrews, right? And while the result of that play sucks, Andrews breaking his leg, it's incredibly unfortunate, this is actually the worst example of a hip drop tackle you could point to. I watched this fucking tackle a dozen times during the season and 24 times this morning, hoping I could see why the NFL thinks this is a problem. And sadly, NFL defenses, you are both officially and royally fucked. Watch this angle. Logan Wilson has his knee on the ground as he slides in to take Mark Andrews down. How is Wilson unweighting himself if his weight is on the ground and Andrews and his momentum brings him back onto Andrews' ankle? The more you watch this play, the more you see it's just an unfortunate coincidence.
There are no coincidences.
If you've followed the NFL closely, say for a decade or 20 years, nobody has really ever mentioned the hip drop tackle being a problem until the last 2 seasons.
We created it. We made it up.
I don't think that phrase was prevalent in my lexicon until the last 2 fucking years. And I've watched football since I was like 5. I acknowledge that you may look at that tackle, you as the viewer, and think, oh yeah, I can see how that's a hip drop tackle. I don't think it is. And that's me being objective. So what the NFL has done, they have taken a play that you and I can both see differently and now ask their officials to make a judgment call consistently on it. If you and I, me here, you the viewer, if we can't agree on what the fuck this is, objectively, okay, how is an official supposed to consistently regulate it? Now, some of you want to point to rugby.
No.
And tell me they banned hip drop tackles a while ago in rugby and that it's totally fine, it's flawless, they did it perfectly. But that's a completely different sport, played at a different speed. Hip drop tackles were a problem there because guys have time to set up and perform them intentionally. Rugby is a safer sport because they don't have pads, right? The speed in which many NFL tackles occur do not compare to rugby. What are you gonna tell me next? That the NFL needs to move back the 3-point line? It's not apples to apples. I will say Kenyon Drake supports this rule change, and I applaud him for saying that. I do. But if I were injured by a certain type of tackle, I'd probably hate it too. We have seen NFL officials err on the side of protecting quarterbacks for roughing the passer. That's still a mess, and that's a much easier penalty to identify. The difference between a hip drop tackle and a tackle is a fine line. That's what I worry about. At some point, the NFL has to realize, based on rules, they have made the game as safe as it needs to be. They've already overdone it, and they will start to take away from the integrity of the game if they keep doing this shit. They're like a beautiful person who is aging and can't stop getting plastic surgery, and at some point they're gonna look like a goddamn monster. Now, late last night, right before the annual NFL owners orgy, they approved the new kickoff rule that had been proposed.
I love that you get the purity of the true kickoff return, plus the player safety, everybody wins.
I'm just gonna show you how NFL kickoffs will look in 2024 with the new changes. In the NFL, the kickers will still line up at the 35-yard line, which is my one problem with this rule change. I'll get to that in a second. This is the landing zone, the area between the 20-yard line and the goal line, and all kicks must get into that zone, or kickers will be punished by death. Kickers can't cross the 50-yard line after the kick, so gone are the days of our elite kickers who are also tackling gunners. Pat McAfee should really hate this rule, but a guy like Justin Reed doing kickoffs could be pretty valuable. Kickers can still easily blast the ball out of the back of the end zone for a touchback since they didn't move the kick back. The whole point of this rule, though, is to decrease the amount of touchbacks. So why not move the kicker back, like they did in the XFL and USFL, and make it physically more challenging for them to kick the ball out of the play? If you're an NFL kicker who can't kick the ball out of the back of the end zone, the league actually considers you a non-athlete and you will never receive medical benefits, you fucking losers. Now the nuance here is this: any kick that goes into the landing zone must be returned. Kickoffs that hit the landing zone and then go into the end zone must be returned or downed by the receiving team. If downed, the receiving team would get the ball at its own 20-yard line. Kickoffs that go into the end zone and stay in bounds that are downed would give the receiving team the ball at their own 30-yard line. So by letting a team down the ball in the end zone, by kicking it into the end zone, you are essentially giving up 10 yards of field position. Kickoffs that go out of the back of the end zone, in the air, or by bouncing would also be a touchback at the receiving team's 30-yard line. And that's something, in my opinion, that we could see tweaked if we still see too many touchbacks with this rule change. Kickoff short of the landing zone would be treated like a kickoff out of bounds, and the receiving team would get the ball at its own 40-yard line. That means you won't see any more pooch or squib kicks. RIP to the pooch and squib kick, who are the real victims of this rule change. Fair catches are not allowed, and touchbacks will be marked again at the 30. Onside kicks can still happen, but the kicking team has to announce it for proper formation, so no surprise onside kicks. All this boils down to is you're lining up the kicking and receiving teams on the other side of the field and removing the running start, which will reduce concussions. The NFL reduced concussions on kickoffs by removing the wedge formations, but other than that, the only reason we saw a decline in concussions on kickoffs is because there was a return rate of just 21.7% in 2023. Concussions still occurred at a higher rate on kickoffs compared to other plays, but were reduced because nobody was returning the ball. Cigarettes. Kickoffs are cigarettes. They'll still kill you, but far fewer people smoke, which means far fewer people look cool nowadays.
No.
And this kickoff won't look cool, trust me, but it's better. By comparison, more than 90% of kicks were returned during the last two XFL seasons. The league is hoping this change brings us roughly an 80% return rate. I'll be happy with like 55 to 60%. There were just 4 kickoffs returned for touchdowns last season, the fewest since 2000, and just 42 onside kicks, also the fewest. This will get really interesting if there's a penalty by the offense on point after attempts that carry over to the kickoff. That will certainly result in more kick returns because the kicker will be backed up. The 3 teams that didn't want the new kickoff rule to be implemented were the Packers, Raiders, and 49ers. Maybe those teams saw the same problem I do. If this makes kick returns more effective, why would kicking teams do anything other than just kick the ball out of the back of the end zone and concede the 5 yards or whatever the difference is if they're actually allowing returns to happen? I liked watching kickoffs in the USFL and XFL, so I'm excited for this. You will see more big returns, and this could force teams to focus on building special teams a little more precisely, which I also like for players. Maybe we will see another Devin Hester, a dream that I thought was dead. I watched Broncos returner Marvin Mims make impact plays last season with very few opportunities. Guys like him are going to become more valuable. That's a good thing. What I can say is that the big returns didn't happen as much as you might believe in the spring leagues because guys out on the field can, still tackle. And if this yielded lopsided results in favor of the receiving team, this wouldn't have been considered. What I can't wait to see is a perfectly executed play by the kicking team get negated because the refs thought there was a hip drop tackle on the return. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Those are your new rules. And yes, make sure you go to benchwarmerbrew.com tomorrow for Jess's tea launch. I'm telling you, it's the best fucking tea you ever tasted.